I mean, it will be a revelation after 25 years of journalism to me to come to know that there's such love for Indian politics in the hearts of businessmen that they would, give away all their money and instead try to live in penury.
Given the nature of our democracy, it's not like quid pro quo came into play only because of the electoral bonds. People have been donating to political parties basically because they want some benefit out of it, not because they believe in the ideology or some bullshit like that.
Electoral bonds and the money that is moving through it is one portion of the total money that oils the electoral funding process in India. A large section continues to be in cash. The differential between BJP and the other political parties in the last 10 years has widened to the level that it represents almost the inequality in India. Agencies that were to actually ensure, in case they were quid pro quo, that people were caught, prosecuted, investigated. But the smoking gun proves that these people were instead involved in what might have been extortion in some legal form.
Hello and welcome to the News Minute. For the past 1.5 weeks, independent journalists across the country have been focusing on one story, the electoral bond story, which has the data has given a lot of input about what exactly has happened in the electoral bond scheme and how this scheme was the opaque scheme was used for political funding. And now the data reveals that there are companies that were under investigation by the Enforcement Directorate and central agencies were actually funding political parties. We do not know exactly which political party has received money from these companies, but there is the clear pattern has been established. To talk about this, I have with me Reporters Collective, the team of Reporters Collective, who have been meticulously following the electoral bond story from day one. And joining me is Nitin Sethi, Sri Girish, and Tapasya. Thank you so much for talking to the News Minute. Nitin, let me start with you. What are the big takeaways from the data that has been released by the Election Commission with regards to the electoral bonds?
A couple of things that we already knew has been reaffirmed. One, that the party in power, whether it's center or states, tended to get more money out of the mechanism, and mechanism was built in a fashion that could happen. Two, as we had predicted at Reporters Collective in 2019 with Commodore Lokesh Batra's revelations, that this was going to give complete freedom for shell companies, unlisted companies to move money, unaccounted money, through their accounts in the name of making it banked, but truly unaccounted and money that no citizen would ever come to know. What we've seen is that this was done brazenly. What I think News Minute and News Laundry's work has also additionally shown is that there was a stick and carrot approach that was perhaps used. The only reason I'm using perhaps is because India might be a country of great coincidences that many people donated after ED raids and CBI raids. So let's presume it's a country of great coincidences because we do not have watertight proof to say it, but the dates do suggest a country of crazy democracy where things happen by chance. We've also seen that expected donors perhaps don't exist, what people in large would always presume. We found that for good reasons, and we had written about this earlier, for good reasons, this was an innovative new trick in the book, but not the only trick. What we found was that players who used it, you've been able to uncover some of them. But I must warn, and I think my colleagues will talk of it largely, that we cannot at the moment still claim, at least we at the Reporters Collective can't, that this was money that belonged to the companies who bought the electoral bonds. That some of that work is going on at the Reporters Collective, some perhaps is beyond our remit. But who actually owned that money and how it got funneled, maybe we'll not be able to find, even if the serial numbers came out in a few days. I'll pause here.
Okay, Sri Girish, the first story that Reporters Collective had put out was about how there was the RBI, the Election Commission, all of it, had objections about this electoral bond scheme. And the RBI had also mentioned that this will pave way for shell companies to move their money, to convert their money from black to white. And this opaque scheme will definitely pave way for corruption.
I think Nitin would be the right person to answer that. Yeah.
Sorry, my colleagues are more modest than they need to be. uh, I think, as you rightly said, in 2019, thanks to Commodore Lokesh, Batra, Anjali, Bharadwaj, and others who handed over documents to us at the Reporters Collective, we were able to show that some of the biggest institutions, constitutional authorities, had warned against what exactly is now been proven that it happened. That there would be black money moving, that there was possibilities of foreign companies moving money through this process to political parties, that you would create, in some sense, a bearer bond economy that would be difficult to track once it had been created like a demon. And that's become quite evident. The layer that one did not see coming, and I think that your work at the offices have shown to great extent, and some others, that there was also this stick being used to goad people into paying to one god. And seems there were certain other regional gods also who wanted some payments to be made. But it did gravitate towards largely one party in power, the union government, which, as our work showed, Tapasya had shown this, and maybe she can speak of it, of how SBI did maintain a complete record of transactions while it's still not shown to us.
Well, talking about the transactions and the unique identification number that the electoral bonds have, so the government was in the know of who was buying electoral bonds, on which political party was getting these electoral bonds, right, Tapasya?
So, as has been reported earlier, that the SBI maintains an audit trail. It had asked the government that it needed to have an audit trail, which was why a serial number is there on the electoral bonds. So, SBI does have all of these, the details of who purchased the bonds and where they went, which political party encashed them, and also that the government, the law enforcement agencies can always would tell the SBI, ask the SBI to share this information with them. So it is not out of the purview of the ruling government to know what bonds went to whom.
And
And
Shrigirish, when you, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that SBI has been revealed in the past by Reporters Collective also that SBI, even though it is autonomous, that it has on several occasions blindly followed the directions of the central government to encash illegal expired electoral bonds, and also opened illegal windows for the sale of electoral bonds before certain state elections.
It has, in one instance at least, has even asked for permission from the finance ministry to respond to RTI requests.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's very clear that the SBI, one of the reasons why the SBI was unwilling to share these details is because, the worst kept secret of this government will be out, or like probably, the SBI was under some kind of pressure throughout this entire process of revealing the details and names of those who purchased these bonds.
I would say, from our whistleblowers in the system, senior officers of State Bank of India are quite embarrassed by what the bank has been forced to state in the courts. It's embarrassing for a bank to say we do not keep accounts of 16,000 plus crores of money moving through our systems at a time when it has 2.5 lakh employees, daily transacting more than 1 million transactions worth hundreds of crores. For any self-righteous banker, it would be shameful to have claimed that. Therefore, we can guess the fault, while SBI has had to bear the brunt of making this embarrassing claim in front of the Supreme Court. I think the blame lies with the government for what's being said by the bank.
And also, Sri Girish, the one thing before the data was released, everyone was talking about is the big companies like the Ambanis or the Adanis would have pumped in a lot of money through electoral banks. But that, only a Reliance Group's link has been established so far. But what does it say about the other companies, the companies like, for example, Future Gaming and Hotel Services, Santiago Martin's company, which has topped the list of electoral bonds, and the other companies that have bought these electoral bonds? What is the profile of these companies, and what does this data per se tell us the story of what exactly has happened?
Well, in many cases, we can speculate, of course, about everyone. But in many cases, these are companies that we personally have been tracking, so we do know a little bit about their history. But yes, I mean, as would be the case with many most Indians, we were also caught off guard with some of the names that came up, I guess. But some of the known names and companies that we've been personally tracking would include RP Sanjeev Goenka's firms, uh, who the CAG had revealed, actually not revealed, but had hinted as being involved in coal auction rigging. And we knew the names of these firms and the coal blocks that they managed to grab through rigging only because we had access to internal documents. And the government was very vehemently defending its auction, right? And until as recently as just a couple of weeks ago, when we had brought out a latest update to the same story, where we found out that the government had deliberately excluded another competitor from the auction. So, I mean, names like those cropped up, both the companies involved in the rigging and named by CAG in their internal report for auction rigging are among the top 15 donors in the country. So, I mean, it's a mixed bag, I guess. Some companies we know of, I mean, I'm sure there would be other journalists who would be tracking other companies. But yeah, I think it will take some more time to figure out everything.
And the role of central agencies in this electoral bond story is something which one cannot ignore, because yesterday when the finance minister spoke, she said that okay, companies may have donated money, but still we would have knocked the doors of these companies. The ED would have knocked the doors of these companies. What does one how can we say that? How can we actually link the raids and the timing of these companies donating money through electoral bonds, Nitin?
So I think as the person Girish's work shows us, at least at the Reporters Collective, and several of your works and some other by other independent journalists largely, there is clearly some quid pro quo happening. Can you and I, as independent, as journalists, say that with certainty? No, we can't. What we can prove is the irony of a million coincidences, which all tend to point in a certain direction. In courts, also circumstantial evidence is used to point in certain directions. As journalists, I think our work collectively has sent readers and watchers into that direction, citizens to point that there was a pattern to what was happening. I think a minister is being specious if she says there is no linkage between the two and it's just pure coincidence that across the country, across years, their pattern existed. Fair possible, let's say. But the other way to look at this, and I think that's very critical when you look at the coincidence of the stick and carrot, are these companies who are making a lot of profit? And which would be fair. I could imagine that there is a political party which loves, there's a company that loves political parties to the bottom of its heart. Let's presume. Okay. Now, if you presume that, I still can't believe there are companies that love political parties and politicians so much that they'll cut their own stomach to feed the politician. They would first earn a fair amount, and out of that, they would give some amount to temples, gurdwaras, masjids, poor children, etc., and political parties. Now, there are several stories that the person Garisha put out which show vacant balance sheets, weak balance sheets, loss-making, zero profit or near zero profit-making enterprises which are donating hundreds of crores and tens of crores to these political parties. They've proven that people, large corporate, individuals linked to large corporates like Reliance have been moving crores. Now, I mean, it'll be a revelation after 25 years of journalism to me to come to know that there's such love for Indian politics in the hearts of businessmen that they will, give away all their money and instead try to live in penury.
Tapasya, politically speaking, the Modi government, before coming to power, they promised transparency. They promised that they will put an end to corruption. They promised that they will clean up the political funding system. But what has happened with the data that has emerged now is completely the opposite of what the government had promised. So how do we read this entire data in terms of politically speaking?
first of all, the electoral bond scheme was brought in on by saying that it would be anonymous donations to political parties, since many donors get bad repercussions from political opponents whose they donate to. But as we have seen that this electoral bond scheme has been the most opaque form of political donations. Many curbs on corporations for political donations were completely removed. For example, the 7.5% average net profit over 3 years. That curve was removed. And the quid pro quo that we are still trying. Every journalist around is trying to establish how many corporates were raided, and immediately after that they donated to electoral bonds. There are numerous such instances, and also instances of corporations belonging to politicians donating to BJP after they switched to BJP from some other political party. We've also seen that. Overall, this electoral bonds is rife with such political games happening, and those can very easily be seen through how donations have happened after raids by law enforcement agencies or by people who switch to by big politicians. We have some revelations from MPs of YSRCP, of TDP, who later joined BJP, donating through electoral bonds.
I mean, just to add to that about opacity, because the government claimed that electoral bonds is actually a transparent way of political funding. They actually involved individuals to also donate, right? And there are plenty of names of individuals in the list that the Election Commission has put out.
There is
Some
a
of them are,
Sarabuddin case.
yeah, sure. I'll get to that as well. But it's just about individuals. I mean, there are some utterly ridiculous names like Monica that no one will ever be able to figure out who it is. But I mean, we turned out lucky in one case where a guy named Lakshmidas Vallabhdas Merchant was mentioned. Although there was a typo, we were able to track that this is actually a Reliance guy and a top guy who actually manages their taxation and compliance with companies law, right? And he has shelled out 25 crore. We were able to do that through some publicly available data. So yeah, I mean, that tells you that it's not just a corporate that has to donate on its own from its bank account. I mean, again, we are speculating, but it can do it through individuals. Big guys can do it through individuals. Monica could be one of them, for all we know. But yeah, again, coming back to the political side of it, as one of our revelations has shown, one company, Wonder Cement Limited, is actually owned by members of a family, and the company's vice chairman, in fact, Mr. Bimal Patni, was co-accused in the Sorabuddin encounter case. And the company Wonder Cement, at least 4 other members of the same family have donated to the bonds. So yeah.
Nitin, one argument that is made by BJP spokespersons or BJP leaders is that where is the quid pro quo? This is a scheme that was designed for political donation. If a corporate company has donated money, it should be only considered as donation. But how can you establish quid pro quo? How can you call it quid pro quo? That's the argument that is being made time and again.
One, let's go back to why this scheme was created and the shifting goalposts of the BJP spokespeople. Again, Reporters Collective in 29 brought out the letter that the BJP as a party wrote to the government saying why they love the idea of electoral bond. And they said because we have thousands of people who love us across the country in small villages, towns, and they would like to contribute really small amounts to us. And therefore, this scheme would be great because people could use UPI to give us money, etc., etc. This is a letter we put out in public domain. So this was the claim made then. There was no claim made said large rich corporates want to give us money. I hope I wish Mr. Jaitley had made that claim in public domain then. When it's been found out how it's going, there's defense. I agree with the spokesperson. It's not our job, and we cannot prove completely seal tight that there is a quid pro quo. But in this case, when there's a gun smoking, the bullet's been fired. And two, here is the agencies that were to actually ensure, in case there were quid pro quo, that people were caught, prosecuted, investigated. But the smoking gun proves that these people were instead involved in what might have been extortion in some legal form.
So Tapasya, what next now? Like now that the data is out in public, now there are several patterns that have emerged, several details that have come out in the public domain. What next now? Like what happens after this? Because that's something that everybody wants to know. Now that we know that many companies that were raided have given money to political parties, like Nitin said, that like we discovered something new, that so many corporate companies, so many companies were madly in love with political parties. So that's a big revelation. So but what happens now? How do we take it forward, and how do we hold these companies accountable, or how do we actually find that something wrong has happened?
I mean, I'll answer as a journalist. First of all, the data is in so-called silos. So we have the donor details and the receiving political party details. I am just hopeful that more data will come out. I'm not sure if it will, like the serial numbers of the electoral bonds, so that better matching can happen. And again, I mean, even with this data, there is a lot that can be done, and many independent journalists are doing that right now, and look further into what was going on with these donations. The rest is, I think, out of the scope of my. I can't say much
If I
about
may
that.
add again, sorry, Tapasya, for interjecting. If I may add, Tapasya forgets her own work. She's been tired in the last 4 days.
Yeah.
Who was supposed to bring reforms? It was this government. So today, if Amit Shah, the Home Minister, stands up and says, hey, now we'll be back to cash. Well, this government has the complete mandate to change that tomorrow morning if it wants. It decided not to for the last 10 years. Two, the Election Commission has not been given the teeth to do its job well, whereas the government took the onus upon it to surveil upon the electoral bonds. And as Tapasya's reportage just before this data comes out showed, the government has actually not waited for electoral bonds era to end. It had already progressed a step ahead. It had established a system where by mandate, all donors to all political parties will have to transaction-wise disclose their donations to the income tax department annually. Now, to me, this is a 360-degree surveillance on everyone's political rights, individuals, not just corporates, to donate to someone. So here's a government which once was saying, oh, everyone's scared to give to parties if someone comes to know. And here's the same government which, as electoral bonds gets decimated, sets up another system to actually be more pervasive surveillance on electoral funding in India. Clearly, this is not the government that's looking for reform. So Tapasya is quite right. Our job is not to expect, but to live with what we have and report to the best of our abilities.
And also one last question to all of you. The BJP has benefited out of this electoral bond scheme. The electoral bond scheme has given undue advantage for the BJP. How has it changed elections or political funding in the last 10 years? The kind of advantage or the kind of money that the BJP has today, it appears that they will always have an upper hand when it comes to elections, when it comes to fighting elections or spending money for elections. So, like, what are we looking forward to?
I think one must remember and one must admit, electoral bonds and the money that is moving through it is one portion of the total money that oils the electoral funding process in India. A large section continues to be in cash. One must admit that that will continue. Now, one must think as citizens who are concerned, by then, the government was so vehemently protecting the electoral bonds money. What was the nature of this money that made the BJP and several other parties, I wouldn't say single out just BJP, there are regional parties like TMC which have earned plenty compared to where they stand. what made them so eager for this pot of money which came through bank accounts, yet unaccounted, unknown to citizens? And I think therein lies the answer of the changing pattern of electoral expenditures in India. Uh, it may not change too much the nature of what political parties earn, because we know even in the past, before electoral bonds, political parties in part tended to get a little more than parties out of power. But the differential between BJP and the other political parties in the last 10 years has widened to the level that it represents almost the inequality in India.
Sri Girish?
Well, I just want to say that, I mean, given the nature of our democracy, it's not like quid pro quo came into play only because of the electoral bonds. People have been donating to political parties basically because they want some benefit out of it, not because they believe in the ideology or some bullshit like that. So that has been true always. What made electoral bonds stand out is the fact that the ruling the government knows who has donated to let's say an opposition party and can go after them, and it would be impossible for the public to find out that this could be the reason why. So in that sense, electoral bonds, yeah, they stood out. But I guess we are now going back to a slightly less evil regime, but things will be where they are. Yeah.
Tapasya, your final take on how it has
So,
changed elections, election expenditure?
I'll both of them have almost said everything. I'll just add to it saying that uh, while electoral bonds did give a massive leg up to the ruling party, even though the scheme has now been scraped, as Nitin said earlier, there are mechanisms in place to still ensure that the ruling government, the ruling party surveils and also gets an undue advantage out of whoever is donating. And most recently, the new income tax forms that where every donor has to actually give details of transactions through check or UPI or whatever. That is also something that makes us think, because income tax department is the agency, it is the government, and again they do have this data now on their fingertips and can access it anytime. So it's still bleak, but we have some a very sneak peek into what happened over the last 6 years.
Right. Thank you so much for talking to us, and congratulations on the stories about electoral bonds, because your reportage has, added a lot of context to this entire electoral bonds scheme, and what is right now that is being discussed in several media platforms. Thank you so much.